The BraveSpace Podcast is devoted to the meeting of body and spirit. In a culture of shared respect and love for the life force that moves through us, we move, feel, dance, breathe, touch, and sing in somatic ecstatic prayer. BraveSpace is the place of belonging, safe enough to take the risk of being vulnerable. Welcome to the BraveSpace Podcast. I'm your host, Matthew Nelson, and today we get to go a little deeper with Burcs into his spiritual journey, into what he's faced in his body, and how his consciousness has shifted over time. So in the last conversation with Burcs, we were more focused on the space holding, on the music, on those universal pieces. This is very specific to his journey. Spiritual journeys are individual, right? We're going to hear Burcs' experience. And yet, I think every time that I hear a story like this, I catch a piece or two that speaks to my body and aspects of my experience and helps me to grow. So I hope that's true for you. It's certainly why I want to offer it up.
Hermeticism, right?
Yes.
Like if you've studied any of that practice.
I haven't gone deep into Hermeticism.
I won't go too deep into it, but there's a
word.
lot of Hermes Trismegistus, like ancient philosopher, also known as Thoth. The Emerald Tablet of Thoth. It's these different principles, and they're natural laws. So it's aligning with the natural laws of this realm.
Yes.
So one of the ways that I think of existence and being, my paradigm is so different from what's taught and what's socially accepted. For me right now, I'm not sitting here on a big rock in space called Earth, floating around this sun in this heliocentric model, like this walking, talking, bipedal monkey man, right? Like, I'm dreaming right now. And I've experienced this lucidly, like in ways that I can articulate later. But when I lucid dream at night, right? I avidly lucid dream. I wake up in my dreams and I'm aware of the dream and I'm talking to people and interacting with beings. And when that first started happening, I would be like, Matt, you're a dream character. Because I could feel myself in bed dreaming. I'd be like, you're a dream character. I'm in bed dreaming right now. You're a projection of my consciousness. And they'd be like, screw you, buddy, I'm real. Or the dream would dissolve and I'd wake up.
Because you're interacting with very real energies.
Well, and so then what I would start doing is I would start lucid dreaming, but I would go up to those energies and those people and I would have conversations with them knowing I can feel myself dreaming. Like I can physically feel my body in bed asleep while I'm in the dream time. Right? And I'm interacting and they'd say, tell me about yourself. Like, what are you doing? What do you know? And they would tell me things about existence and like stuff that I don't consciously know. And so that brought to light, are these beings projections of my consciousness, right? And I brought that back to this dream. And I had an experience where I was like, okay. And I had been working with some medicine and stuff. And so I'm in this process and I felt that. And I felt that this reality is that. And I looked at my friend that I was with that was holding space for me. And I said, I related the lucid dream experience.
Yeah.
And I said, so you're just a dream character. And he looked at me and he was right on that wavelength and holding just impeccable space, right? And he said, you're right, B, I am. And in that moment, like that let my mind open up to the place where that was the truth. That was reality. And I had the experience that I call the loneliness of God.
Okay.
Because in that moment, I sat here, lucidly wide awake, and I went, well, if that's the case, where am I dreaming from? Because when I'm asleep, I can feel my body. I know the avatar is asleep in the bed.
Right.
So
But right here.
So now I'm in this avatar that's normally dreaming. Where am I coming from? Where's the signal being broadcast from? And I went back to what people refer to as the singularity mentally, right?
Yeah.
And it's so hard to articulate in words. and try to paint a picture for you, but it was, if you've ever been in like a float tank experience or somewhere where you've had your senses isolated and you're just consciousness, that's what I went back to. I was just an awareness. No body, no being. Nothing else existed, like blackness and thought.
Yeah.
Right? And I looked around and there was nothing there. And Neil Donald Walsh talks about this in his book, Conversations with God. He talks about how that happened. And then that awareness looked inward. And when it looked inward, it exploded into dichotomy. You and I, black and white, yin and yang. Right?
Yep.
So that it could experience
Dualism.
itself. Yeah, dualism. So it could experience itself. Because when you're just that singular point of consciousness with nothing else, what are you? How do you define yourself? You can't.
Right.
Because you are all that is.
Right.
But in being in that moment, I was like, whoa. And I was here too at the same time. It was very like dualism. Like,
Your description of the situation, of drawing it from the dream time where you're aware of yourself in the bed into the sense of bringing it into this world is a beautiful path.
it was a fractal.
Yeah, because it reveals that piece where it's like, yeah, what is this dream?
Exactly. And so
I get it as
I came back
it lands.
and I was like, I said to Ian, I was like, what's the point? This is all fake. This is all a dream. What's the point? Why? My mother, who I love dearly, isn't real. My best friends don't matter. Nothing I've accomplished matters for anything.
And then there's love.
Even love, it's fake. Like I'm in that moment, right?
Right.
Okay, in this moment where
Okay.
we're like as if I'm
Tracking you.
there processing.
Yeah, I started resisting it. I wanted
Right.
to like take us out of that.
No, this has a
tension.
happy ending.
Yeah, but it's amazing how
It
much
gets there.
I just jumped in to try to take us
Right.
out of that state.
Right. And so I said, what's the point? Like it's almost, for lack of a better term, like masturbatory. It's
Yeah.
I'm the God in the nothingness with the VR goggles on, fooling myself. Oh, it's all real. Let me just go into the metaverse. Right? When the truth of what I am and what we are is that we're a singular consciousness that has nothing else to interact with. And in that, I was extremely lonely.
Yeah.
Because I felt that loneliness of the being that has nothing but itself to relate to.
Yes.
And it was like, I will never be lonely as a human ever again. Because I felt what it feels like to be the only thing in existence. You can't beat that level of loneliness. Right?
Yes.
And so I asked Ian,
Thank you.
what's the point? Why? I'm fooling myself to believe that this world is real. And he looked at me, and this kid, man, like we used to bodybuild together. We would just go to the gym and lift together, and we weren't even in a container at this point. We were just two kids at a cabin having an experience, right? And I look at him, I say, what's the point? And he looks at me, and he was so dialed into the moment, what I needed, and holding that space for me. He just said, because before enlightenment, chop wood and carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood and carry water. And I had heard that so many times. And in that moment, it all clicked. Because to chop wood and carry water, to have hands to chop wood and carry water, to have friends to chop wood and carry water with,
Yes.
is so much better than that loneliness of being the only thing that exists.
Yes.
Whether it's real or not, I don't care because it feels real, because I can look into your eyes and into his eyes and into my mother's eyes, and I can feel you. And we can teach each other things, and we can learn, and we can do podcasts, and we can like explore all of this together. And it's in the dreaming, in the interaction, that it becomes real. What is real? Real is when you feel it.
Yeah.
That's what makes it real.
Yeah.
Right? Just like a fairy tale, just like any Disney movie, like magic is real when you feel it.
There's the first principle in BraveSpace is somatic research. And what that means is feeling from the inside. So what's different about a somatic perspective, which I feel like is what I'm recognizing really in doing this podcast right away, it's so clear to me this is spiritual work.
Right.
And it's because when we go to the external, when we're like coming from the science perspective of measure everything from the outside, everything becomes objects.
Yes.
But when we go inside and do the research, experimenting, just still scientific process.
Right.
But it's self-referential. It doesn't mean I can universalize. I can't say, this is true for me, so it's true for you, which is kind of the old religious experiment as I see it.
Right.
That's why we've seen kind of religion in the way that it's been isn't working anymore.
Yeah, it projects subjective experience as objective experience.
Right.
It doesn't translate.
So then you go into dance and plant medicine and meditation, and all these forms are doing the experiment from the inside. You had an inner experience of truth based on your process with your dreams and your process with, being the divine in isolation, it sounds like.
And I came out of that still trying to operate in the old paradigm. The next day, I couldn't shake it. I went to the store, and it was funny because we were throwing a bachelor party at the cabin for one of my best friends who's actually a facilitator now. And like, it wasn't a traditional bachelor party, because we're all intentional and whatever.
Yeah.
And so I go to the store to get some food to barbecue for everybody, and I walk into this warehouse full of fake objects. And I'm just like, I'm using fake money to pay the fake cashier so I can take the fake objects back to my fake cabin for my fake friends. I was just and I remember calling my girlfriend at the time crying. And I was like, you're real, right? And she's like, what are you talking about? She's like, I'm at a bachelorette party. Like, talk to the boys, let your friend help you. But yes, I'm very real. And it was ironic because I was calling the dream character, asking the dream character to tell me she was real. Like, I wanted that Maya back. I wanted that illusion.
Yes.
And I was still trying to operate from that paradigm, right? I wasn't trying to drop into my heart and feel that it was real. I needed external validation that that person was a concrete being and a thing that I could experience and was having her own subjective experience to validate that it was real instead of feeling it somatically like you're talking about. I can call her on the phone, hear her voice, feel her love, and know she's real.
Right.
So I was in a process of redefining what was real, right?
Yeah. As we're talking, I'm thinking about the people listening to this.
Right.
And wondering where there is, I want to keep this grounded for them. I don't want us to spin people out of, but also what you're speaking to is so important of this relationship between the illusory and the real. And I think what you're naming, the way it hits me is that there is no objective way to tell. There's no such thing as an objective way to tell what's real, but we have the inner and this sense of inner reality. It doesn't mean that it's going to be true for everyone else. So we have the place, the intersubjective.
Right.
We have this relationship where we meet in the communal. And we can't give up, we could, but it's going to help a lot to enjoy this world if we keep alive the inner mystery.
Yes. And that was why I was missing the Maya, right? The illusion.
Right.
And so then it shifted from that to like this fear and this, again, pushing against, like the natural flow was pushing me into this new truth of being in my heart and feeling and appreciating and dreaming this dream awake. But I was pushing against it. And when I surrendered to it,
I just got nauseous.
It was gnarly. It was really gnarly. Like, I was throwing a bachelor party at a cabin and I thought everyone was fake. Like I basically had a psychotic break.
Yes.
Right?
Right.
And I was still functioning and I like knew how to navigate these spaces, but this was long before I had any of these practices or these tools. Like I was just starting to dip my toes into, again, I've always been interested, but I was just starting to dip my toes into like really leveraging these things and working with these things, right?
Yeah.
So it's not who I am now speaking back then. It's like this like early 30s, young kid, still sick as hell, like already struggling with health stuff. Now my mental's all off. And when I integrated it, when I stopped pushing against it and I surrendered and I dropped into that feeling space.
Yeah.
Because I have a hard time when people are drop into your heart space. You know, it's become this kind of regurgitated phrase.
Right.
When we talk about that, we're talking again to demystify the esoteric, like we're talking about dropping into your feelings, right? Your emotions. So when I dropped into that space, oh my God, man, like everything was so beautiful because I was dreaming everyone, right? I was almost in like full on solipsism where I'm the only thing that exists and everyone else is a dream character. Because when you think about it, like I can tell you I'm having a subjective experience and you choose to believe me, but you cannot, and neither can anyone else, verify that anyone outside of their consciousness is real or concrete or having an objective or subjective experience.
Yeah.
Like you could be dreaming everyone that you interact with.
Right.
And I was living that as truth. I remember going to get a burger in Salt Lake and we get to the place and I like pay for my food and like Wanda or whoever, the cashier on the other side, takes my money, and it was the total opposite experience of what I'd experienced in the store the day after, right? Like I have money, like I have hands to give money to Wanda.
Oh my God.
And she takes it and she hands me food that I get to put in my body and I get to feel the taste of it in my mouth and I get to feel my digestive organs moving and I get to feel all of the serotonin and dopamine and neurotransmitters flooding my body, oxytocin, like I didn't care if it was real anymore. I was so in that feeling space that I was like, this is glorious.
Yes.
What a gift to be in this life. To have hands and money and a girlfriend and food. Like, it brings me to tears now because I had never been that grateful to be alive. I had always been so entitled.
I resonate.
Chop wood and carry water.
Yeah.
Ugh. And now I was in this place of I get to chop wood and carry water.
Yeah.
And that's probably one of the biggest gifts I've ever received. And it translates into everything I do now. And it's part of why I'm so laid back, like we were talking about before we started. Because like, why not? Like just sitting here breathing and talking to you and sharing stories. It's such a gift.
Yeah.
Sit in the studio and make music and make art. Make love and dance and fight and struggle and hurt and be sick.
Yeah.
I would say it was the only thing that carried me through being sick. Because at that point I was so ready to give up.
Yeah.
Like I said, I wanted to die. I wasn't going to kill myself. I wasn't suicidal, but I didn't want to live anymore. And in that moment, I realized it was a gift to be sick.
To be carried
to have a
into
body.
that state and feel it. There's another piece of the heart center as I've been taught it, which is healing presence. And it's this understanding as best I can comprehend it, that the experience of longing for healing is the healing. It's like the sickness is the healing process.
Yes.
It's the vitality coming through and the change happening.
Yeah.
And if I can allow myself to be fully present with that, that's the healing. That is healing. It's not the place I need to get to. It is this experience, which is deeply uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But also what a gift to just like be given an experience.
It's amazing. You realize what a gift. All of it is. Not, you don't just try to bypass and do the rainbows and butterflies. Like now when I have conflict in my life, when I have struggle, when I have challenge, there's a great book called The Obstacle is the Way, and it's a Stoic philosophy, right? Like the obstacle is the way. I get excited. Ooh, look at all this juicy conflict. Look at all this juicy upheaval.
Here's the burger.
Mana, right? Power, energy. Just consume it. Be with it. Use it. Propel yourself forward from it. Savor every experience, because at some point we're going to be laying on our deathbed, knowing that this dream is about to end, and we're going to wake up, and we're going to miss being in pain.
Yeah.
Like imagine that this all goes away and we return to the loneliness of God, the singular, no pain, no struggle, no sickness, no joy, no love either. But like, I would much rather take pain and struggle and sickness than nothing. It's all a gift.
Yes.
It's all a gift.
And it lands on the floor in bass music. We haven't even talked about bass yet.
This is the uniqueness of me and my personality. I'm very like,
and I love the journey. It is also, I mean, this is improvisation, right? What's alive? Right. We follow the aliveness. And I never would have forecast this discussion. And it's so beautiful.
That's that being in that flow. Something wants to use you and I to have a conversation, to create a podcast, to influence and affect the rest of itself.
Yeah.
And we can script it all day. We had a little chat about where we might go, and we had a great conversation just then, right? We cut it off because we were like, we got to save this for tomorrow. But whatever is in the moment, whatever is real, and whatever wants to come through, that is being part of that flow and that inherent harmony and grand perfection. It's going to come through us, and someone's going to be listening. And I needed to hear that. And if we would have been, this is how we have to go, we have to answer these questions and talk about these things, like that person might never get the thing that they need,
Yeah. So true.
But bass music.
Yeah, you were talking, there's a word that you used,
Cymatics.
Cymatics. Here we are on a Cymatics podcast, talk about Cymatics. Fill that one in for us.
Cymatics.
Yeah.
So cymatics, and I could butcher this. I am not like by any means an expert on this, but cymatics is the geometrical physical structure of sound. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of like videos and different things where you see someone put a plate of sand on a speaker and play tones through it, and it forms sacred geometry. A really great example that people don't realize is a turtle shell. A turtle shell is actually has cymatic patterns in it. You can do some research. Everyone listening can dive into that. But it's all over in nature. Like there's a vibratory essence to everything. Everything has sound.
Yeah.
When you see the experiment where they crack a crystal wine glass with sound, right? They turn the sound up and then it shatters.
Oh yeah.
So people don't know this, but it's actually that glass has a frequency, right? That structure of that glass has a frequency that it's holding.
Yep.
So what happens is when you hit that pitch, when the opera singer sings and she cracks the glass, it's not because of the force hitting that glass and it falling apart or shattering like it would if you hit it with a hammer.
Right.
It's because she's matching the pitch of the frequency of its structure and it's disintegrating.
Wow.
It's actually falling apart because it's like putting water into water. It just dissolves into the water.
Yeah.
So that cymatic frequency of that physical thing is matching the cymatic frequency of her voice, and like it just dissolves. It loses its physical structure.
I as you're saying that, I'm drawing the metaphor of, when you put a frequency out on the dance floor and it's like our social patterning changes. It matches a frequency of what's alive in us, in our animal being, and all these social norms of keeping ourselves solid and still, and our eros not being allowed to show, and and then we become more authentic, as I see it.
Right.
That's where I talk about BraveSpace as a place we can take the risk of being vulnerable with each other. And vulnerable is like, why would I want to be vulnerable? Well, it's because we are vulnerable. We're all gonna die. We're gonna get hurt. We're gonna experience the beauty and the pain. It's all right there. So if we can let it disintegrate,
Yeah.
then we're more alive. And so that resonance, and one of the questions I've been wanting to ask you is just this relationship to authenticity and vulnerability. And I see you supporting that and how you're supporting that. Just wanted to bring that in.
This is a beautiful question because about 2 years ago, I went through a breakup and we were still talking and interacting, and we got together to kind of iron some things out. And I told her, I was like, I want to be vulnerable with you, but I'm afraid. Like, I don't, because of what's happened between us, I don't know if I can trust to tell you my truth and be honest. And she looked at me, and at the time it pissed me off so bad. But she said, Burcs, that's not how vulnerability works. Vulnerability doesn't imply safety. In fact, it applies the opposite. Like, you're not being vulnerable if you're safe, if you know you're safe.
Yes.
Like, vulnerability requires no safety net. It requires the leap and the chance that it might not work out, right? So I worked with that for another like 6 to 8 months, and I was working with a therapist. And I ended up in another relationship, and I was feeling the same thing, afraid to be vulnerable, right? The fear of vulnerability. And I was talking to my therapist about it, and I said, I just hate this word vulnerability because in my mind, and this is subjective, but vulnerability means weakness.
Right.
So anytime I'm vulnerable, I'm weak, which makes sense. You know, if you're trying to fortify a space or something like a castle or a home, and it's vulnerable in any way, then it's weak. There's a weak point in the moat or the fence or the guardway or whatever, right? Like, and she said to me, I love that you phrased this way when you asked this question, because she said to me, what if we she said, what can we replace the word vulnerability with so that it doesn't sound like weakness and it sounds like strength? And I said, authenticity. So you're blowing my mind right now because you're drawing directly from my experience with my therapist. And so I don't even use the word vulnerability anymore. I use the word authentic or authenticity.
Yeah.
Right? Can I be authentic in this moment? In the breakup situation, I wanted to be authentic with her, but I was afraid it wouldn't be received or I'd be manipulated or whatever.
Yes.
But I'm the kind of person who, if I'm not authentic, like, inauthenticity is my biggest turnoff. When people are fake, that's why it's funny, because I actually
all this discussion back to what's fake and what's real.
Right.
This is territory we've been swimming in for a while.
Right. And it's funny because I engage really well on social media, and like my account blew up last year and I got like 10,000 followers in like 4 weeks. And like,
oh, wow.
I've noticed that I actually, like, I've got agreements with companies as influencer and stuff, like, and I've hated that. I've dated multiple influencers now.
Yeah.
And the reason I hated it was because of the lack of authenticity. It was a show.
Yeah.
It was performative. Like, I knew them behind the scenes and they were nothing like what they were putting out on social media.
Right.
And they had thousands of followers, 20, 80,000 followers.
Yes.
And I was just like, this is so not in integrity to be putting on this show. And it was still a part of who they were. Like, I'm not knocking them down at all. They're on their path and their way. But for me, I didn't want to do the social media thing or the influencer thing for so long because I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to be inauthentic because inauthenticity turns me off so bad. So to come back to what you're saying, putting authenticity in place of vulnerability changes the game completely. Because I can't not be authentic. It's not possible. I can avoid vulnerability all day.
Right.
But for me to avoid being authentic feels like the hugest self-betrayal ever.
As I've been working through what is authenticity, one of the big pieces that comes up for me is that it's still hand in hand with vulnerability. The risk that I'm going to lose my identity in the next moment. Because to be authentic is to recognize I'm not who I was a moment ago.
Right.
And to find out, to do the research, have the experiment
Yeah.
of what's this moment of this being that's coming through me.
Yeah.
And that's why I love improvisation in dance. That's why I love improvisational relationship, right? Contact improvisation, where we're meeting each other's energy, because it's unpredictable. So I get to find out, who am I in this moment? Who am I in this moment? And that's the huge, it's a huge risk, and it's brilliantly fun.
Right. But the risk of not doing it outweighs the risk involved in doing it. That's what I came to, right? Like the risk of not being authentic did not compare at all to the risk that was involved in whatever situation, like what would come of me being authentic.
It's rushing death. It's like, either way, we can lean too far either way and rush death on a certain level. Death is coming. So it's
We're all going to wake up eventually.
We're all going to wake up eventually. So it's like, well, if I want to play here, play. Like really show up to the risk.
Chop the wood, carry the water, be vulnerable, be authentic, savor every moment, because you don't know when you're going to wake up. And how many of us have been having the best dream ever and then it abruptly ends?
Yeah.
And how bummed are we when that happens?
Yeah.
Well, if that happens with this life, I want to know that I lived full on, savored every moment, appreciated everything that happened as much as I could. Because one day it's going to end, and you're not going to regret not doing the thing. You're going to regret not savoring the thing that you will never have again. Good and bad.
Yeah.
To come full circle again.
Yeah.
Spirals.
Around and around and around.
Because this piece that you've just heard has come from a larger conversation, I just want to refer you back to the other episode with Burcs that came out alongside this one, and you'll be able to have a larger context if you're just tuning in here. I feel lucky to know Burcs and consider him a friend, and I hope that you got as much from his journey as I feel I have. Please follow the podcast. You can find us on YouTube. You can find us on Spotify and Apple, and also, of course, at BraveSpace Cymatics.com. Till next time, I'm Matthew Nelson.